Hey everybody, it's D from D&D Ditches, and today the D stands for desirable. And you know what's desirable? AD&D 2nd edition box sets, especially the Planescape ones. Don't believe me? Check out eBay. Today I'll be showing you all 6 of the box sets released for Planescape 2nd edition as part 1 of my 3-part series to showcase the full Planescape product line released under 2E. This video will contain the box sets in order of release, which are the Planescape campaign setting, Planes of Chaos, Planes of Lore, a player's primer to the Outlands, Planes of Conflict, and Hellbound, the Blood War. I will give you an overview of what's contained in each box set as well as a summary of each product. This will just be for a first look, as at a later stage I will release separate reviews for each of the products covered today. First up, we have the Planescape campaign setting, which was released in April 1994. It is now 30 years old. This would be the starter box set that you need to pick up if you wanted to run Planescape. Most of the settings back in 2E had a starter box like this. I'm one of these crazy people who feels the need to own multiple sets of everything. As you can see, this set, the box is not in the greatest condition. It is a little bit squashed. This is what I call a play set. So if I was to run a game and I wanted to bring out one of these books or one of these posters to show a player something in the book, this would be the set that I would use. I also have another set that's my collector's set. And the third set is the original set that I purchased back in the 90s. It is still in my mum's basement somewhere, so if I ever get to go home and pick it up, I will let you guys know. Back in 2E, all of the campaign setting box sets came with its own DM screen, which is, they all kind of look like this. As you can see, it's a lot flimsier and thinner than the 5E DM screens that you might be used to. And the information that's contained in them, generally you have 2 panels that's used for 2E base rule set, and then 2 of the panels would be the setting specific rules. And on the player side, you have the Lady of Pain, and this is the logo that they use for Planescape. Now let's have a look at the poster maps. We have 4 of these. They are double-sided. I will show you the posters and the books in more detail when I get to make the individual review video for this product. But as a quick look, this is a poster of how the planes connect to each other. So you have the inner planes, the material plane, and the outer planes. And on the other side, you have the Planescape cosmographical table. This is a poster with all of the powers and which plane that they reside. Now, powers is what Planescape calls the gods or the deities. Now we also have a map of the Outlands. This map will go on to be updated a couple of times for subsequent products. We also have a map of Sigil, the city. This map also gets updated a couple of times in further products. And the last poster that we have shows you all the faction symbols. Factions play a big part in Sigil, the City of Doors. And now we have the 4 remaining books. So out of these, we have a monstrous supplement, which is a 32-page booklet. So when this box set was released back in 1994, if you wanted to run Planescape, DMs would have access to the 2E Monstrous Manual. TSR also released several Monstrous Compendiums, which can be considered expansions to the original Monstrous Manual. There was one called the Outer Planes Appendix, which details monsters from the Outer Planes that if you own that product, you could also use that. But this booklet also gave you some additional or updated monsters that you can use in your Planescape game. So if you have a look at the table of contents, we have Cranium Rats, Darbus, Modron, which are all creatures well represented in the Planescape setting. Once again, we have artwork done by Tony DiTerlizzi. This is the Dabus. You can think of them like public servants in the city of Sigil. They essentially go around the city and do a lot of repair maintenance work. They will build new structures and they answer only to the Lady of Pain. And they do not speak, but what they do instead is that they would project these symbols in the air, kind of like their version of a minor illusion, if you will. And they speak in rebus, which are word puzzles with emojis. It gives these creatures a lot of flavor from a lore perspective, but also makes it really difficult to roleplay in practice because try to construct a whole conversation using these symbols and emojis. You'll be there all day. Typically in 2E, they would lump the stat blocks of the same species together under the same section. Because in 2E, the monster entries would go and talk about their ecology, their culture, their habitat, their social structure, and so on and so forth. So it makes sense for all the types of the Modrons to be lumped together because they're actually talking about the entire race or the entire species of Modrons as a whole. And now we have 3 more books remaining. We have Sigil and Beyond, A Player's Guide to the Planes, and A DM's Guide to the Planes. Now this is a fairly common strategy that TSR implemented back in the 2nd edition era, was that most box sets would have a booklet on a player's guide and then also a separate booklet for the DM's guide. So the rationale behind this strategy was trying to incentivize players from purchasing these products and box sets. So these days you hear people complain about the DM shortage for 5e, and let me tell you, back in the day, this was no different. A typical D&D group will have, say, 4 to 6 players and 1 DM, and most products and campaign settings were inherently designed for a DM to use. However, that's not really a sustainable strategy, because imagine if most of your products, only 20% of your customers would purchase. So they try to do this thing where they would include a player's guide for every box set or most products, as it would give the players a reason to pick up and purchase this book. So the expectation would be that a player would read this book. See how it says on the back, this book is intended to be read first by players and dungeon masters alike. And the players will be expected to stop once they finish this book and read no further, because on the back of the DM's book, it says this book is intended for the DM's eyes only. So TSR will continue to use this strategy going forward, as you will see as we move on to further box sets, that you'll see time and time again that there'll be a booklet included for the players. So did this strategy work? Well, you have to give them credit for trying, but in saying that, WotC's still trying to implement elements of the strategy as seen by books like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, where the first few pages are devoted to new player options with new races like the Herringon and the Fairy. So this book is intended to be read first. Let's have a look at the table of contents. So the first few pages are an introduction to Planescape. It talks about the planes, the idea of the planes, how planes are infinite, and it talks about Sigil, and then it gives you player options. Planescape introduces 3 new player races. We have Baria, the goat centaur. They have the head and torso of a human, with horns, of course, and the lower body of a ram or a goat. We also have the Githzerai, which are the sibling race to the Githyanki. Anybody who played Baldur's Gate 3 should know what a Githyanki is, and there's also a little bit of lore in that game about the Githzerai if you paid attention. And Tieflings were also introduced in Planescape, which became a fan favorite race in 5e. You'll have Planescape to thank for that. The book does not give you any illustrations of the new races though, and for that we have to move on to the factions section. So this talks about the 15 factions of Sigil, and it is through these illustrations that you'll be able to find some of the newer races. We have the Baria. You see he has a head and torso of a human with the horns and lower body of a goat. So most of these illustrations depicts the factole of the leader of a faction. Not always, because some factions don't have factoles, such as the Revolutionary League. We also have factole Reese of the Transcendent Order, who was a tiefling. When the tieflings were introduced back in this box set, they had a lot more variety, whereas 4e and 5e have homogenized the look of tieflings a bit. Most of the tieflings that you see these days with the red skin and devil horns are called the Asmodeus brood. There was some lore behind that, but towards the later 5e, they started reintroducing some of the more varied tieflings, but it's very rarely depicted in any art. And we also have the Givzerai, which hails from Limbo. We're going to take a look at a DM's Guide to the Planes next. This is the illustration of the Lady of Pain. The Lady of Pain holds ultimate authority in Sigil, the City of Doors, although she is not a god. She has the ultimate control of all the portals in Sigil, and the setting implies that she is more powerful than a god because she is able to keep gods out of Sigil. However, it's also a bad idea to worship the Lady of Pain, as those who do end up dead or worse. This book first talks about the magic of the planes, as magic and spells may work differently depending on the plane that you are on. This is a table showing the differences. And then the book goes on and gives you very brief description of the planes. It starts with the inner planes first of all. These are the elemental planes. As you can see, each plane's only given about half a page of write-up. And then we move on to the outer planes, which are the heavens and the hells of the afterlives. It talks about the way to get around. And each of the outer planes are given a full page of write-up. Each of the outer planes may contain multiple layers. For example, the 9 hells of Beator obviously has 9 layers. But then you have the Beastlands, which have 3 layers. Given each plane only gets a single page of write-up, when there are more layers, for example Beator, you're only getting sometimes a single paragraph describing the layer, for example Cania. These planes will be further expanded in future products, but you would really need to use your own imagination if you really wanted to run the planes using this box set. The final book that we have is called Sigil and Beyond. And yes, it is pronounced Sigil with a hard G. This book is 96 pages. And as you can see via this quote here, it says, "We can excuse the fact that you slaughtered 2 Yugoloths before you realized where you were, outsider. But you pronounced the name of our fair city Sigil, not Sigil, and there can be no excuse for that." This book starts with the tone of the setting, as it can be difficult but also quite important to get the tone and the themes right. And it goes on to talk about the factions. Philosophers with clubs is what the designers of Planescape used when they envisioned the factions. And then it goes on about what type of adventures that you could have in Planescape. And then the book goes on to talk about the Outlands, which is the true neutral outer plane. And just like the 5e book, Outlands and Sigil gets quite a lot of feature in this starter set, because it is assumed that a lot of your lower level adventures would take place in Sigil and the Outlands. Some of the gate towns like Ribcage and some of the realms like the Palace of Judgment are given write-ups in this book, but not every single one of them. And then the book moves on to Sigil. As you can see, this depicts a typical skyline of Sigil with plenty of spikes and blades. Now there is a lore reason why the skyline is like that. The book then goes on to explain the inhabitants of Sigil, such as the Lady of Pain, the Dabus, and modes of transport, the factions, And then it moves on to giving you descriptions of the 6 wards of Sigil. And then towards the end, the book gives you 2 quick start campaign adventures. Now these are not full-on adventures, as they're only given about a page and a half worth of write-up. It's more of an idea or a hook that the DM can expand upon and use it to get players into Planescape. They're called Misplaced Spirit and For the Price of a Rose. I have used both of these. Now both of them can be a fun way to bring your character into Sigil. Later on I can make a video about the adventure hooks that you can use to start your own Planescape adventure, which may include these. Next up we have Planes of Chaos, the campaign expansion. This was released in July 1994, 3 months after the initial campaign setting box set. Now I own 2 of these. This is my play copy. I acquired this and the campaign setting box set that I just previously showed you from a gentleman from Interstate because my collector's copy of this box set is sealed. Let's take a look at the contents inside. The Planes of Chaos box set covers 5 outer planes aligned with the chaotic side of the outer planes. These planes cover the spectrum from chaotic good to chaotic evil. We have Arborea, also known as Olympus, a Greek-themed plane. Then we have Isgard, also known as Asgard, a Norse-themed plane. And then we have Limbo, Pandemonium, and representing chaotic evil is the Abyss. Now there should be 5 of these posters, 1 per plane, but I do believe this box set is incomplete. I've got 2 that's missing. Once again, they are double-sided. And this covers the Abyss. The artwork depicts a bottomless pit as it has infinite layers, whereas on the side you have some artwork which depicts the towns or realms of this plane. And we also have Pandemonium and Limbo. It seems like this set is missing Arborea and Isgard. Don't fret, I will give you a closer look of all of the posters when I do the review video for this product. This box set also comes with its own monstrous supplement, which is again 32 pages. Some of the creatures covered by this booklet are the Fancier, which are the Isgardian trolls, the Lelend, which are snake women that guards the infinite staircase. We have some extra Tenari, which are demons, and Viper Tree, which are trees with branches made of vipers, typically found in the Abyss. This is the illustration for the Lelend, which refers to a singular creature, and the plural form is called the Lelendi. They play quite a significant role in the adventure Tales from the Infinite Staircase, which I am currently running. My players have encountered them a few times, and it's been memorable each time. This box set also contains 3 booklets. We have the Travel Log, which is essentially the player's guide, the Book of Chaos, which is the DM's guide, and the Chaos Adventures. This book is intended to be read by players and Dungeon Masters both. It is 48 pages, and as its namesake, it's written to be like a travel log of the 5 planes of chaos. There are a lot of new full-page artwork done by Tony DiTerlizzi in this. It's a lot more colorful than the base box. It serves as a player's introduction to each of the planes and gives a write-up on 2 or 3 sites located on each plane. This book also introduces the concept of a planar sect. A planar sect is like a faction with its own beliefs and philosophies. There is a lore reason why only 15 factions are allowed to operate in Sigil at a time, whereas a planar sect typically has its base of operation located in an outer plane, as we've got the Anarchs Guild, the Converts, the Dispossessed. As the outer planes are shaped by beliefs, the planar sects also try to proliferate their philosophy and their influence, just not based in Sigil. Let's look at the Book of Chaos next. This is 128 pages. It is essentially a longer and more expanded version of the travelogue, but written for DMs. So each plane starts with the magical and physical conditions, as each plane has specific properties and other effects on magic. As a DM, I do like to use the rules for magic as it makes the planes feel more distinct from each other. The book then goes on to describe each of the layers of the plane. For example, for Arborea, you have Olympus, the first layer, Ossa, the second layer, and Pelion being the third layer. It gives you descriptions on realms, towns, and sites found on the planes. For example, we have Brightwater, which is the realm of Sune, Lyra, and Timora of the Faerunian pantheon. As most gods and deities, or as Planescape calls them, powers, make their home on the outer planes. This book does cover all the sites described in the travelogue, except in more detail. Each of these entries are given a purpose, names of NPCs, rulers, the movers and shakers, and then also what's happening behind the throne. Tells you what sort of services that are available. Each of these sites typically also have a certain shtick or something that they're known for. And then it also gives you some write-up on local news or some gossip or current affairs that's developing that you can work into your story. As a DM, while I'm prepping for my game, and if I know that my players are going to travel to a certain plane, I will read up about that plane. For example, I have taken my party to Isgard previously, so I would go to this book and I will read through the physical and magical conditions, and then look through the section to see if there are any realms or towns on sites that are going to be interesting. And then I would take note of anything that I can use as interesting plot hooks or interesting NPCs that I could use in my own game. Now we have the final book, Chaos Adventures. This is 32 pages. This book attempts to provide 15 adventures for the Planes of Chaos. It gives 3 adventures per plane. We have one for high level, one for mid level, and one for low level. Now I use the word attempt because these adventures are not supposed to be run directly from the book. As you can see, each adventure is only given 2 pages worth of write-up. But what it's good for is it provides you with the adventure hooks, and a lot of them are quite varied. You're given a synopsis and also the background information, and then you're given an outline on how typically the adventure would flow. And of course, just like any D&D session, your game will be derailed in the first 10 minutes by the players anyway, so you're going to have to make up the rest of it yourself. But this book is good to farm for ideas, as it provides a lot of plot hooks that's typically outside of what you see in D&D, like slay this monster or explore that dungeon. You're also encouraged to play to Planescape strength, which is role-playing. So a lot can be accomplished by the art of philosophy and challenging the NPC's beliefs. If you want to use any of these, the DM will have to put some work into it. For example, this low-level Abyssal adventure, the brief of this adventure being the owner of an inn in the Abyss tried to get rid of a pack of cranium rats using poison, but the rats outsmarted the owner and started using the poison on the guests. This is a great low-level adventure because the PCs are not in any real danger because they're not pitted against high-level enemies, and the premise of the adventure encourages the players to think of creative ways to combat the problem. I've planned to use this adventure a couple of times, but I've just not had the chance to yet. And that concludes the Planes of Chaos. Now's a good time to remind you to subscribe because we have more showcase videos coming up, and give this video a thumb up. And let me know in the comments what other content you would like to see. Next up, we have the Planes of Lore box set, which was released in January 1995. This is 6 months after the previous Planes of Chaos box set. Now, unlike the first 2, I only own one of these. But let's open it up and see what's inside. Planes of Lore is the most content-packed box set, as you can see. There are so many books in this. We have 5 poster maps and 7 booklets. The format of Planes of Lore is similar to Planes of Chaos, except each of the 5 Planes of Lore are given its own individual booklet. This goes to show the high production value of the Planescape line and why these box sets are so valuable. The 5 Planes of Lore being covered in this box set are Acheron, Machinus, Mount Celestia, Arcadia, and Beator, also known as the 9 Hells. And just like the Planes of Chaos box set, each plane has its own poster map. And once again, I won't go through all of these in detail because this will get its own review video. Make sure that you don't miss out, hit that subscribe button. This poster is for Acheron. Acheron is the plane of the eternal battles. And this is also the plane where the bugbear, goblins, and orc powers reside. And what the plane looks like is, imagine humongous giant metal cubes like these. Imagine the D6s. They're floating in space. The inhabitants live on each of the faces of the cubes and they wage eternal war with each other. And occasionally you have these cubes that will collide and smash against each other. So if you don't get out of the way quickly enough, the cubes will crush everything on the face of the impact. Then we have Machinus, the plane of lawful neutrality. And these posters are double-sided. So on the back, you typically find some valuable information which describes the creatures or something to do with that plane. So on the back of Machinus, you have the Modron ecology and the ranks. The Modrons were covered in the monstrous supplement that came with the base box, but it did not have the artwork of all the different types of Modrons on there, but this poster does actually show each of the subclass of Modrons and what they look like. And on the other side, this is Machinus. The entire plane is made out of giant interconnected cogs, and any cities or realms will be on the cog themselves. And then we have Beator, Mount Celestia, and Arcadia. So I won't go through all of these. We also have its own individual monstrous supplement, another 32-pager. This book includes creatures such as the Archons, which are the angel-like celestials hailing from Mount Celestia. We've got Bladelings from Acheron, Formians and Centaurs from Arcadia, Chiton, which are also known as Chain Devils from Beator, Rust Dragons are from Acheron, and then you've got the Zoveri, which are the octopus centaurs from under the sea. They have the head and torso of a human and the tentacles of an octopus. They're from Mount Celestia and they're a lawful good creature. You wouldn't expect so. Here is an artwork of it. We also have Formians. Formians are also featured in the adventure tales from the Infinite Staircase. My party's currently in Arcadia, so wish us luck. And we also have a player's guide to lore. This book essentially goes through the same formula as the travel log from the Planes of Chaos. As you can see, each plane gets 1 or 2 sites covered. And we have a lot of new art as well. It's very colorful. Not only are the faces occupied by humanoids like goblins and orcs, they also have rivers on them. Arcadia, Beator, the garden is one of my favorite places in Beator. Really want to take my party there someday. So for the remaining 5 booklets, this is essentially the equivalent of the DM's guide in the Planes of Chaos box. The setup for each plane is quite similar. You have physical conditions, magical conditions for each plane. And then it goes on to talk about the inhabitants of the planes. And then it goes through the layers and the sites and realms and towns and places on each layer. There's a lot of new artwork for each of the planes. And at the end of the book, it also provides you with the template for 3 adventures for each plane. Just like the Planes of Chaos book, we have a high, a mid, and a low level adventure. And the setup is pretty much the same. You have a 2-pager, and most of them are still quite good, but it does require homework from the DM's behalf to really make this adventure sing and make it yours. This is the Parai, a new creature. And this is an example of how the cities rest on top of a cog in Mechanus. And we are also introduced to some new planar sects. This is the Order of the Planes Militant from Mount Celestia. They're typically lawful good, and what they want to do is conquer the rest of the multiverse by turning everything lawful good. Remember how I said earlier that the outer planes are shaped by belief? I do actually mean that literally. Using these guys as an example, if they went to Elysium, which is neutral good, and they're able to manage to teach a town about the value of law and order and able to get the people of this town to adopt that value, shifting that town's alignment to lawful good, what would happen is that this entire town would be whisked away from Elysium and it will now exist in Mount Celestia instead. Because each of the outer planes are aligned with a certain alignment belief, if a town no longer fits the alignment of that plane, the entire town will shift to the plane that matches this alignment the closest. I believe in 5e this is called cosmic realignment, and this is what the Order of Planes Militant set out to do. They're essentially trying to conquer the multiverse by turning everything lawful good. Next we have Arcadia, which sits between lawful good and lawful neutral. There are realms in this plane from the Dwarven Pantheon, the Babylonian Pantheon, and also the Egyptian Pantheon. Arcadia also has one of my favorite Planescape meta stories, which is associated with the high level adventure that's provided, but I won't spoil it here because it's really good. The last book we have is the 9 Hells of Beator. There is one weakness with this box set, and that's with this book. The ruler of the 9 Hells of Beator are called the Lords of the Nine. This book goes on to give 3 of the lords pseudonyms or false identities. As the 9 Hells is one of the most popular planes being used in future adventures, the lore will continue to be developed, but unfortunately it's not until after the Planescape setting has been discontinued that the full canon is established. For any DMs that wants to run a significant amount of their plane in Beator, especially if your campaign deals with intrigue and politics, I would recommend supplementing your game using some products from later editions. The Fiendish Codex Volume 2 from 3.5 is really good for that, because it actually gives you the full story on all of the lords in canon. If you're going to stick with this book, you're going to end up with potentially outdated lore. And that is the end of Planes of Lore. And next up we have A Player's Primer to the Outlands. This was released in April 1995, a full year after the original box set. The first thing that you might notice is that this box is a lot slimmer than the others. And there is a reason that this box set is slimmer than the others. If you can see that at the corner there is a sticker that says audio CD game. Now this came with an audio CD, not really a game though. Let's have a look inside. This is the audio CD, also known as a compact disc, was invented in 1982. It was a medium used to store data. Some of you may be raising an eyebrow at me trying to explain what a CD is, but I realize that most computers these days do not have a CD drive. Back in the day, and I'm talking the 80s and 90s, most music would be released in the form of a compact disc. But then you also had computer software and games that would also come on a disc like this. So this disc in particular, I'll just give you a closer look on that. I'm just going to put the CD down because it will make sense in a second. And let's have a look what else is contained in this slim box. Not much by the looks of things. We have a poster map and also a 32-page book and some marketing material. We have a poster map of the Outlands, which is an updated map from the Outlands that we saw in the base book set. So this is one of the updated maps that I talked about. So every other outer plane borders the Outlands in a ring formation, and this is the reason why this version of the planes is also called the Great Ring or the Great Wheel, which refers to the outer planes. In the center of the Outlands, we have the spire, which is infinitely tall. Now you can climb the spire, but given that it is of infinite height, you will never be able to get to the other side. And on top of the spire, we have a donut or torus-shaped city called Sigil. So Sigil, known as the City of Doors, the only way in or out of the city is via portals. There is no way to climb from the spire into the city. And we also have some maps for 4 of the gate towns. And you may be wondering, hey Ditch, what is this skull thing that's on the cover? Well, let's have a look. So this book introduces a new and wondrous magical item called the Mimir, M-I-M-I-R. They're often depicted like skulls, such as in this artwork, but they don't have to be. The book does say that they can take on the shape of other things, but it seems the skull motif is the most common depiction of the Mimir. Now, what does it do? I think of the Mimir as a cross between a pocket encyclopedia and a tour guide. There is an amount of information that's stored within the Mimir, but do understand that this is not a sentient living being. It is an inanimate magical object after all. You can ask the Mimir questions, kind of like Siri, and if it knows the answer, it'll respond. But it does not have the answer for everything. Some of the later Planescape products also implies that the Mimir has other powers as well, such as visual and or audio recording. So it's just a wondrous magical item that has powers that the DM sees fit for their campaign. In this book, however, it's treated like a tour guide, and the book is kind of written like a tour of the Outlands. On the back of the book, it actually tells you what the tracks are contained on this disc. So these tracks include the names of the gate towns and also the realms and places in the Outlands. So what I think is contained on the audio CD is likely the information that the Mimir will give you when you ask about one of these places on the Outlands. But then again, I haven't actually heard it myself, so it could be something else. I have heard that the acting is a bit cringe though, so maybe I'll do a reaction video. So the other question that you might have is, why is this such a bare bones box set? So what I read on the internet was that TSR really wanted to push this audio medium. And there was a bit of a buzzword floating around in the 90s called multimedia. The idea was releasing products that would target multiple senses. So in this case, we have a visual medium, and they also wanted to marry the visual with the audio. And around about this time, they released several products across different product lines that would also include the CD, such as the Light of Balfry for Ravenloft, and one of the Red Steel box sets also had a CD. So this was really something that they was really trying to push. However, the downside of that was that the actors that they hired were expensive, so they blew most of the budget on this disc recording. So by the time that the designers got the brief of this product, management has already spent most of the budget, so they had to just make do with whatever little budget that they've got left over. And this 32-page booklet is what we ended up getting. So apart from introducing us to the Mimir, what does this booklet cover? It gave us one-page write-ups of all of the gate towns of the Outlands. So when we looked at the map earlier, we saw that the Outlands is bordered by every single outer plane. And near the border on the Outland side is a corresponding gate town. Each gate town has a semi-permanent portal that leads to the neighboring outer plane. I described this to my players in one of my games, and one of my players said, hey, that sounds like it's a front door to the plane. And I actually really like that description, because if we think of the portals going into the planes from Sigil as back doors, the front door would be through the gate town. You might be wondering, hey Ditch, why does the portal appear in the gate town and not the town that's down the street? Well, that's a great question. The gate town is the place in the entire multiverse that closestly matches the alignment of the neighboring plane. So for example, we have Excelsior, which is the gate town to Mount Celestia of the Lawful Good alignment. Excelsior being the town that is the most similar to the Lawful Good ideals of the Mount, but isn't quite there yet. And that's the reason why it stays on the Outlands and haven't slipped into Mount Celestia as of yet. Given that they're so close, sometimes it will just take one or two events happening that makes the town more lawful and more good. And if that ever happened, Excelsior will slip into Mount Celestia, cosmic realignment would happen, and the gate town would be lost. What happens then is that another town will rise up to take its place, taking elements of the lawful goodness, and then the portal to Mount Celestia will appear in this new town. And on the outer plane side, it is quite common to see a string of former gate towns that have since slipped into the plane. Now, all of these gate towns have a certain shtick, and this is the reason why the gate town has not slipped into the outer plane yet. And generally the locals want to keep up this shtick to have the town anchored in the Outlands, because there are political and economical benefits with being a gate town. So for example, we have Excelsior. This is the gate town of militant paladins. There are a lot of paladins from competing orders going around saying, I'm holier than you. No, I'm holier than thou. And it often boils over to an all-out brawl as these paladins duke it out, which is not exactly a lawful good behavior. And that's the reason why Excelsior has not slipped into Celestia. And on this side, you have Ecstasy, the gate town to Elysium, the neutral good plane. And their shtick lies in the Philosopher's Court, which is an open-air amphitheater of sort. And people from all across the multiverse comes to Ecstasy to debate philosophy. And the differing of opinions is what keeps it anchored in the Outlands. Apart from the gate towns, we also have some coverage about the other realms and sites in the Outlands, but as you can see, the write-up on these is tiny. This is even less than the Sigil and the Outlands book from the base box set. So that's it. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have The Planes of Conflict, which was released in November 1995, and that was a full year and a half after the release of the original box set. So far, we've already covered the 5 lawful planes and the 5 chaotic planes, as well as the true neutral Outlands. So what's left over are the 3 neutral good and 3 neutral evil outer planes. Back in the day, DMs waited a long time to get some additional information and have these planes more fleshed out, especially since most of these planes are considered boring by the fandom. Let's open it up and have a look inside. Okay, here we go. We have only 5 booklets this time. They didn't go through as much effort as the Planes of Lore box set, but we should have 6 poster maps, 1 for each plane. Let's have a look at this one. On one side, you have information on the Yugoloths. Yugoloths are the neutral evil aligned fiend. Back in 1E, they were called the Daemons, but 5E has actually retained Yugoloth, the name. And this is a map of Karseri. This is the plane which lies between the neutral evil Grey Waste and the chaotic evil Abyss. In first edition, this plane was called Tartarus, so essentially it is a prison plane. And the name Karseri, I believe, comes from the word incarceration, because it's a prison plane. This plane has 6 layers, which are underneath one another, kind of like this. And these globes are strung together like a string of pearls. And because it's a prison plane, it's supposed to be notoriously difficult to escape. We will cover the rest of these posters in its own video. Let's move on to the books. Once again, we have its own Monstrous Supplement 32 page. None of these creatures are particularly noteworthy, but we have the Burak, which is similar to a Shedu from Elysium. We have Nyath from Bitopia, and we also have a new Yugoloth, the Baenaloth. So this is the Nyath from Bitopia. Bitopia is also known as the Twin Paradises. Its two layers face each other like this. Each side has an impossibly tall mountain, and because they face each other, the mountains actually connect in the middle. Travelers are able to climb the mountain from one layer to the next, but in between the layer, the gravity actually shifts from one to the other side. While the traveler is disoriented from the change in gravity, these guys who are not affected by gravity, and they don't fly, it's more likely they float in the air. They like to hang out around the area where the mountains meet, and they prey on the travelers traveling from one layer to another. So just because it's one of the heavenly upper planes doesn't mean it's safe. The next book is A Player's Guide to Conflict. Similar to the previous box sets, this book also gives you some introduction to the planes, some new artwork, and planar sects that inhabit those planes. While the Planes of Lore box set gave us a separate booklet for each of the 5 planes, Planes of Conflict just gives us 2. We have Liber Benevolentiae and Liber Malevolentiae. Clearly the words where benevolent and malevolent comes from, so we have the upper planes and the lower planes. This book covers the Beastlands, Bitopia, and Elysium, the 3 outer planes aligned with neutral good, and it contains a similar information as per previous books. These are also the planes that are considered the boringest of the outer planes. When you have so many heavens, it's kind of difficult to make them distinct. Remember when I talked about the Nyath of Bitopia? This picture illustrates them preying on the travelers. I have used this book specifically for Bitopia, and on the surface, Bitopia is one of those planes that it would seem difficult to make it interesting. But this book actually does a fairly good job at creating plot hooks, because a lot of these write-ups have a surprising amount of intrigue and a good amount of potential to lead up to further stories down the track. It just takes a little bit of DM creativity. I actually quite enjoyed a romp through Bitopia. This next book covers the 3 neutral evil aligned planes, which are Gehenna, Kasiri, and the Grey Waste. Now these planes are only considered slightly less uninteresting, but I guess it's easier to differentiate between the different hells rather than the different heavens. These planes also receive some expansion from the next box set, as you'll see as well, so they end up faring better than the neutral good planes. And the last book we have is called Adventures in Conflict. This is 32 pages and is the included adventure books. However, if you look at the table of contents, the setup is a little bit different than the previous box sets. If you remember previously, we had 3 adventures per plane, but they were only given a 2-page write-up. But in this case, they've actually gone for quality instead of quantity. We're only given 4 adventures. We have 1 for low level, 2 medium, and 1 high. And the good news is that they've actually been expanded on quite a bit, whereas now it's a bit more in line with the published modules. Each of these adventures will probably take you a couple of sessions to run through. Overall, I like the fact that these adventures are written with a lot more detail. However, I do miss the plot hooks from the previous books. And that is the Planes of Conflict. And the last box set that's part of our show and tell video today is Hellbound, The Blood War. It is a deluxe adventure and accessory box set. It is the only one of this type that's released for the Planescape line, but I do know for a fact that they plan to release another one, but due to budget constraints because of TSR's poor finances, they had to scale back. This was released in June 1994. As per the name of this product, it deals with the Blood War. It expands on the lore and provides an accompanied adventure and other goodies. This box is not in the greatest condition, as you can see. We have quite a bit of sun damage on this side, so whoever owned this previously would have left it on a bookshelf, presumably for years, and the sun's bleached the color out of the side of this box. Let's open it up. Now these books are not part of this box set. I left them in as a bit of a preview for the next video, but there is also a reason why I leave them in this box. So I've talked about this box not being in the greatest condition. The lid is in pretty decent shape now, but not when I first acquired it. I purchased this box about 12 years ago, and at the time this piece of cardboard was quite sunken in. You can see that the box is still a little bit sunken in, but it's a lot better than it was before. And there are two reasons why I store these supplement books inside the box sets. Because first of all, it protects the books. And secondly, it provides additional padding for the inside, which encourages the cardboard box to retain its shape. So because I store the books inside this box for 12 years now, it's helped the lid to regain its shape. So let's take out the books that's not part of this box set. They will be featured for next episode, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. As this box set's marketed as a deluxe adventure and accessory, they're not kidding. Look at the amount of goodies that came with it. Firstly, let's have a look at this book. Hellbound the Bargain. Any guesses on what this is? If you said comic book, you would have been right. This is a 16-page comic book by Rob Ruppel and Tony DiTerlizzi. Each of the artists have a different style, but I think that they complement each other quite well in the context of this book. This gives you a story and additional context to the Blood War and the adventure. The next one that we're going to have a look at is the Planescape Conspectus. Now this is actually propaganda. Now what I mean by that was that back in 1995, in an effort to push the campaign settings that TSR had, they printed marketing material for each of these settings, and they're called the Conspectus. I know of 5. There was Planescape, Birthright, Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, and Dragonlance. I'm not sure if Ravenloft got one. Essentially, these were similar to pamphlets or brochures that one can pick up for free back in the day from your local gaming store, and it gives you some brief information on what the setting is about. So they concentrated a lot on the art for the Planescape one, but since the art of Planescape is god tier, I think trying to sell this setting by its art is probably not the worst idea. This is one of my favorite pieces of DiTerlizzi's art with the Gizuri climbing the stairs, and you have the Slards that's climbing down the stairs. And this is the marketing part where it tells you all the products that's been released or on the release schedule. Now, I just talked about the Conspectus being a piece of marketing material that one can pick up for free, but every single set of Hellbound that I have seen has had the Conspectus included. So I wonder if they just included a copy of the Conspectus in every single Hellbound box set. After all, it does carry the red motif. And once again, we have a separate player's guide and the DM's guide. The table of contents is on the back. This is 32 pages. This book gives a brief description of the lower planes. And here you can see some of the official pronunciation for some of the lower planes. Beator. Beator. That's also how it was pronounced in Baldur's Gate 3. If you follow Will's story, you will eventually find a scene where they pronounce Beator in the game. And then we have Gehenna and Kaseri. The book then goes on about the different classes and how they contribute towards the war, and the factions, and Sigil's role in the war. If you've been keeping up with the Planescape line so far, there would actually be precious little new information in this book. It's really only helpful for those players who's been living under a rock and who don't know what the Blood War is. And if you've been living under a rock and you don't know what the Blood War is, let me summarize that for you quickly. On the Outer Planes, we have a group of fiends that calls themselves the Beatizu, also known as devils. They're lawful evil aligned and come from 9 hells of Beator. And then we have another group of fiends that call themselves the Tanari, also known as the demons. They're chaotic evil aligned and they come from the abyss. Since both groups of fiends are evilly aligned, you would think that they want to work together to take over the multiverse, right? No. They absolutely hate each other more than anything else. They've been waging war against each other since the dawn of the planes, and this never-ending war is called the Blood War. And this book, The Dark of the War, aims to explore the war in more detail. This book is 80 pages and is designed for the Dungeon Master's use only. So first of all, it goes into the history of the war. It summarizes how the war broke out and gives a timeline of the war. Talks about the leaders of the fiends and their role in the war, and then goes into tactics and strategies, which addresses the infrastructure, supply lines, how they source their soldiers, and typical battle strategies. Then addresses the role of magic in the war and gives some new spells. One thing that we got to remember is that both groups of fiends have a lot of natural immunities, for example, fire. So each side is continuously trying to research and find ways to overcome each other's immunities and resistances, which some of these spells are designed to do. The book then goes on to talk about the sites of the war, the places that the fiends do battle. The battlegrounds are strewn all across the lower planes, which is part of the reason why we got a bit of a write-up on the lower planes in this book. The book then closes out by talking about mercenaries, and it gives some ideas on how to run games if your players wish to take part in the Blood War. The next book we have is called War Games, and this is the adventure book. And you may have noticed that I have not talked about the Vision of War book as of yet. So let's have a look at both of these together. This book contains 3 adventure modules, which forms a storyline involved in the Blood War. You can run these adventures individually or you can run them together. This adventure is designed for 4 to 6 players between 5th to 8th level. I have not read through these adventures in detail, but I heard that these modules include a lot of combat, which is not really the focal point for Planescape. Most Planescape modules really lean heavily into the roleplay due to the philosophy and the faction element, and also the exploration and survival due to the planar travel element. So if you're looking for a palate cleanser and want to do quite a bit of combat, this might be a decent option. So the brief premises on these adventures obviously deals with the Blood War, but apart from the 2 groups of fiends that I previously talked about, the Beatizu and the Tanari, there is also a 3rd group of fiends called the Yugoloth. They are the neutral evil aligned fiend. They generally play the role of mercenaries in the Blood War. They're willing to fight for either side that's willing to pay them, and they're also quite notorious for switching sides. There is a deeper relationship that the Yugoloth have with both groups of fiends, and this module aims to explore that. And the last book, The Vision of War, this booklet contains artwork and depicts scenes and sites as included in the adventure module. So when you get to a certain part of the adventure, the DM can just hold up the artwork in this book and say, this is what you see. You've come up to a fortress or a castle. And this is what TSR meant when they call this a deluxe adventure, because it does actually give you additional tools that really brings this adventure to life. You have amazing artwork, which helps with the visual depiction, world building, and helps you set the scene. You have additional lore books, which expands on the history and nuances of the war. You have comic book, which gives you additional inspiration with the story. So overall, a fantastic product. And that's all we're going to cover today for Hellbound. Hey, thanks for staying to the end of the video. If you got something out of that, give me a thumb up. And subscribe because I've got more content coming. And comment down below on what you would like to see. Until next time, hope we get to hang out again in my next video.